Carol and Cheryl, Cheryl and Carol, Carol and Cheryl.
Hi, welcome back to Conversations with Carol and Cheryl. Hi, Carol.
Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, Diane Bonilla. We have Diane Bonilla with us today, who's going to talk to us about Anxiety 101. Diane, you want to talk to us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I always love doing different topics with you ladies on mental health, and really appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk about anxiety today. So I'm a licensed professional counselor and have over 25 years of clinical experience in the community mental health setting and in the private practice setting. Began my work in anxiety during the early 90s and specialize in grief, loss, anxiety, and panic issues with young adults and just adults through the generations.
Thanks, Diane.
So today, with our Anxiety 101 episode on the podcast, I wanted to just talk about how we can manage anxiety in a holistic way. And by holistic, I basically mean managing the physical, emotional, spiritual needs of the whole person, not just one aspect of the person. And it's important to understand, too, that anxiety is something that is felt by everyone. There's a universality to anxiety. We all feel it as humans. Some feel it more than others. And unfortunately, many struggle with anxiety quietly. We don't even know that they're struggling with it. Anxiety does, however, serve a purpose, and it keeps us safe from danger. It moves us to action. It triggers our defense mechanisms that protect us, the fight, flight, freeze defense responses. So it does serve a purpose, and it is important to understand that we all do feel it at one time or another. The goal here, though, is not to eliminate it. The goal is to manage it, and that's what I hope to get into with you today in a holistic way. So to start with, I think it's important when we try to manage our own anxiety that we understand what's going on in our body. So I wanted you all to have a little bit of knowledge, a little neuroscience knowledge to help you become your own anxiety expert. When you understand what's going on, you feel less anxious about it, and you can actually almost be more of an observer to your symptoms rather than engaging it too much. And I'll talk about that as well. There's a concept of neuroplasticity of the brain. And basically what I mean by that is the brain can change. We actually can rewire our brain. We can change its patterns of responses to things, including its thoughts, feelings, and we can actually develop a brain that is more resistant to anxiety. And this is just very hopeful news, I think, for people that struggle with it, that we can actually change our brain so that we feel less anxious. There are two basic parts of the brain that get involved with anxiety, and those are the amygdala and the cortex. And I promise to stop here on the neuroscience after that. The amygdala comes from a Greek word that means almond, and it is almond-shaped. The amygdala is on both sides of our brain. The amygdala's job is to look for danger. It's constantly scanning. It's scanning to keep us safe. It's responsible for the fight, flight, freeze defense responses. And the amygdala can get triggered by memories from the past, something in the present maybe that reminds the amygdala of the past. It can also just get triggered by current environmental factors. It is working while we are not aware. It's not in our immediate conscious. It's scanning, but we're not aware that it's scanning. And unfortunately, for many people that have anxiety, their amygdala is just overactive. And because it's overactive, it's larger. It has more connections, and it's just, unfortunately, bigger. And the problem with the amygdala is that it does make mistakes. It actually can overprotect you. So these people that have larger amygdalas are scanning more. They're liable to feel more anxious in general and even have anxiety disorders. Regardless, our amygdala can make errors. and really just do its job too well. So that's what I wanted to get in today, a little bit with you about how to calm the amygdala down. Did you guys have any questions about that? Or
So, are you born with the size of the amygdala? I can't say
The
it.
almond.
The almond.
the
I
almond?
could call it the almond. Does that mean someone that has an enlarged one went through trauma early in their life? I mean, does it correlate to anything like that?
It does. It actually does. So you can actually see it on an MRI. You can actually see the size of the amygdala when you do an MRI. And research has been able to determine that the amygdala can be enlarged in very early life, when a child is very young. So exposure to stress, chronic stress, exposure to trauma, and actually even having a caregiver in early years, infancy, childhood, having a caregiver that has an anxiety disorder that exposure can also make someone more susceptible to anxiety as an adult. So all of those things can contribute to an overactive amygdala. The problem isn't that it's larger, but because it's larger, it's overactive. And so it's going to just be scanning more and just, possibly creating more anxiety than is necessary, overprotecting.
Now, can they just be born with it big?
I'm not sure about the research on that. That I don't know. Yeah. So in terms of the other party involved in the brain with anxiety is the cortex. And this is the part of the brain that creates thoughts, and it creates specific worries that can trigger anxiety. And this is the place that's responsible for triggering overthinking about things, catastrophizing about things, negative thinking patterns. All of those things are anxiety thought loops that we can get stuck on. I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but I'm assuming if you're listening to the podcast, you probably know the symptoms of anxiety, but nervousness, restlessness, a sense of doom, panic, increased heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating. Are you feeling anxious yet? Just even talking about these symptoms. Trembling, it can affect concentration, can affect sleep. It can cause gastrointestinal issues, and anxiety can make us feel weak and tired even because it requires a lot of energy from us to attend to it. Calming your amygdala down and working with the cortex will address these physical symptoms that are so common, in anxiety, and also help us get unstuck in those thought loops that happen in the cortex. With that in mind, know that the amygdala can just act on its own and trigger anxiety all by itself while it's scanning, but your cortex can also trigger anxiety based on a thought that it has. And the goal here is to manage both of them, to calm the amygdala down and disrupt the anxiety thought loop. And hopefully with these next few things I go over, something will resonate with you that you can take home and try.
Do they work hand in hand?
They can trigger anxiety independently of one another, but they can also feed off of each other. So, if the amygdala is scanning and is signaling danger and a rapid heart rate and rapid breathing and sweating, and then the cortex gets involved and is like, what's wrong with me? Why am I sweating? Oh my God, I'm dying, whatever. I mean, you all probably know how that goes, but we can create these stories in our mind, and the two of them just feed off of each other, and it can be quite a mess. So that's why it's real important to target the amygdala and to target the cortex and get them both to settle down a bit.
Okay.
So thank you for bringing that up. Yes, they can definitely interact. So let's start with physical wellness. I think that's a great place to start if you're feeling anxiety. Maybe it's more than usual. It's a great place to start with management. We can feel out of control with anxiety, but it's nice to know that there's things we can do that we can intentionally choose to do to help manage it. So I always tell clients when they come to see me about anxiety, the first thing they really have to do if they haven't already is to rule out medical causes first. So you really want to talk to your medical provider about your symptoms. There are medical diagnoses that can look like anxiety or cause anxiety symptoms. So that would be like thyroid issues, diabetes, heart disease can even cause anxiety symptoms. even asthma. So it's just really important as a first step if you're new to anxiety, or if you're not new to anxiety, but you haven't had a checkup in a while, it's really important to just get that checked out first as a very first step. Another thing that I tell my clients is to watch their cats. And it's just an easy way to remember these 4 things. And that would stand for caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, and sugar. All of these things can mess with anxiety symptoms. They can make them worse. They can trigger them. Caffeine can make symptoms worse. It can interfere with sleep, which doesn't help. We need our sleep to be able to regulate our emotions, including regulate and manage anxiety. So take a look at that. Take a look at your caffeine intake. Alcohol, let's face it, you have a glass of wine or something, you feel relaxed. If you're anxious, that feels good. The problem is hours to a full day after the alcohol has worn off, anxiety can be triggered. So then you're facing anxiety all over again, and perhaps even worse. So alcohol is something to take a look at if you're having a particularly tough time with anxiety. You can take a look at what your intake is if you are consuming alcohol. Tobacco, there's a lot of problems with tobacco, but smoking is associated with increased rates of anxiety. Nicotine dependence is associated with increased anxiety disorders, panic disorders. And unfortunately, early exposure to smoke in utero, as an infant, or even as an adolescent, can also increase your odds for an anxiety disorder later in life. So there's a lot of research out there on that. There's a lot of research on nicotine affecting your neurotransmitters, where the problem lies with anxiety. And then finally, sugar. That's the S in cats. You want to avoid your simple carb foods and your sugary drinks and sugar substitutes like NutraSweet in particular. So all of those things, again, will affect anxiety in some way, or can. So getting a physical, talking with your provider, and watching your cats are great places to start. And you can see if that makes a difference for you. If it does, that's great. If not, I have a lot of other things that we can talk about too that you can look at. Diet. Just a few things, that I've discovered along the way, and research has supported that, stay hydrated. Mild hydration can actually impact anxiety. And I think a lot of us aren't drinking enough water. It's just real important to figure out what your amount is and stay hydrated. Consuming complex carbs instead of the simple ones like whole grains, that will actually increase your serotonin level. And that serotonin has like a calming effect. So, increasing those whole grains, drinking, staying hydrated, drinking your water. And then if you're a person that has food sensitivities, obviously you're probably avoiding them, but that food sensitivities, if you happen to indulge in something you're sensitive in, can also trigger anxieties. So these are just some of the ways that you can look at your physical health, your diet, and see how making any adjustments, either with your doctor, can positively impact your anxiety level and make the management a little bit easier.
People really need to get it through their head, me included. I don't mean it the way it came out like that, but you really need to eat just to fuel your body. It's not for pleasure.
It's not?
No. I mean, if it tastes good, it's bad for you.
I think what I hear Diane saying is the mind and the body are connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the brain is going to tell the body through sweat and increased heart rate, there's something wrong. And then whatever you're doing to your body with sugar and caffeine and tobacco, all our comforts are affecting the brain. It's like a two-way street.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Right. And it can be very empowering to know that there's something like that, like something simple like, wow, I've just been drinking too much caffeine. I need to take a look at that and see if that impacts my anxiety. And you'd be surprised. There are people that have been managing their anxiety well. Maybe they were in therapy at one time, and then all of a sudden the anxiety's back. And it's like, well, wait, I'm doing all those things I learned in therapy. And then when a physical assessment is done at the beginning, at the first session, again, when they're back in therapy, they realize, oh my gosh, I've been drinking caffeine like it's, going out of style. I love my pumpkin spice lattes and reducing those or eliminating them again has successfully brought the anxiety back into a manageable place again. So it's just a really great place to start, in terms of your management. And I think it's a hopeful thing for people.
Well, what I like about it is we can be in control of it.
Absolutely.
We do control what goes in our mouth. So that gives us some power, right?
Because anxiety can make us feel like we're not in control. So I think that is an important point, Carol, to note there. Don't take everything on at once after you listen to this podcast. Start with something that feels right for you. Start with one thing, and see if that makes a difference in your life. If you don't know how to go about it, talk to your doctor about it, talk to your therapist about it. But don't get overwhelmed. Just as you listen, make note of anything you think is a good one for you to start with. So the next thing that I think is really important and involves physical wellness with anxiety management is exercise and movement. And, really, exercising is great. That is going to help. That discharges the stress hormones. It invites the calming hormones. But I think for people that aren't exercisers, it's okay. Obviously there's benefits to exercise, but with anxiety, what I want to get across is it's movement. So you don't have to break a sweat to manage anxiety. You just want to be moving. And I'll give you some examples of some little exercises, interventions that you can do in just a second. But there's a doctor who's done a lot of research in this area of movement and anxiety management. His name is Dr. Peter Levine. He's been in the field for about 40 years. And he did a lot of studies on how the body experiences anxiety or somatic, experiencing. And I love his example about when a dog, for all you people that have furry friends out there, you probably know that there's something that makes your dog scared. With mine, he's a little more hard of hearing now, so it's not so much an issue, but it used to be thunder. And so my Beagle used to just, he was terrified of thunder. And even after the storm was gone, and, we had basically tended to him, hugged him, had him up by us, whatever we needed to do to help him feel okay again. For a period of time after, there were these intervals of tremors. He'd seem fine, and then you'd see him sort of tremor a little or shake. And came to find out, and Dr. Levine talks about it, it's really the body's way of discharging stress hormones. And it's just innate for them. They just tremble, and it gets rid of that extra adrenaline that got revved up when they were afraid, when their amygdala, noticed that there was something wrong. Basically, you can think of movement as the opposite of paralysis, of anxiety paralysis. You want to move, you want to get those hormones, those stress hormones, you want to get rid of them. So here's some ideas for you. And when I'm talking about movement, I'm talking about intuitive movement. So that would be nothing choreographed, no rules about how you have to move. Intuitive movement is moving how your body and you feel called to move at the time. So let's say you're anxious, you're in a thought loop you're worried about something and you're just stuck, or maybe you're anxious and you can't figure out why. So in terms of moving, there's a couple little exercises you could do, but you're going to move however you feel called to move. Maybe it's just sitting at your desk, if you're working and you're anxious and you're just shaking your legs back and forth, just stomping your feet a little bit on the ground back and forth. Whatever you feel up to doing, but you want some kind of movement to discharge that stress. If you're a parent and you want to help your kids with anxiety, I always think it's great to give them tools to empower them. There's a mirror game that you can do. So when your child is anxious, you can take turns doing some kind of movement. It can be anything you want. The parent will mirror what the other person has done. And so you take turns back and forth mirroring the movement. And it really engages the child and the adult, and you're moving however you're called to move, which is what intuitive movement is. Jumping in place, those are things you can do with the kids, but you can do them as an adult. Dancing, anybody can dance. So any kind of movement is okay, is the message here. College kids, teens, maybe they don't want to do that. That's not really cool to do that. So, I tell my young adults, make a playlist. Go on Spotify, whatever your app is that you listen to music, and make a playlist. And that playlist is just for when you're feeling anxious, and it's for you to move to, in private, in your dorm room, in your bedroom, wherever you are. Obviously not driving, but have that saved and ready to go to help you discharge that stress. And then another thing you can do, this isn't so much movement, but it's something that might come naturally when you are, say, dancing, is singing and humming. Singing actually releases oxytocin, which is a calming hormone. And the other benefit also is that if you are in a thought loop, if you're catastrophizing about something, and you turn your music on and you start to dance, or you move your legs and you start to sing the lyrics, you can't do both really well at the same time. You can't think about what you're worried about and get into that deep hole, but also sing the lyrics. So it's a distraction, but it's also inviting that oxytocin in. So those are just some fun things to do. Share them with your kids. Empower them to be their own anxiety experts and know what to do when they start to feel that icky feeling, in their gut or whatever, or just that anxious feeling. Sometimes in kids, it can be irritability even. So please share. Any thoughts about this stuff, guys?
Well, cats are bad. Dogs are good.
Yes, watch your cats.
Yes, watch your cats. I really like what you said because I feel like I'm in control and I have strategies to minimize my anxiety. And then a lot of times my anxiety is, like you said, I'm just making up stories in my head, or I'm dress rehearsing some tragedy that's never going to happen. I can reset myself and get back to the present moment and get on with it.
It's all about being able to reset. The more you practice them, when you find that one that works for you, the more you practice them, the more effective they are. That's just how it works. And then you're giving your brain a different response to the thing that's triggering the anxiety. And it's like building a new road. Like, think of it like when you first start out using these interventions, you're laying down the gravel. It's like a gravel road, and your brain may still want to go the way it's used to, but you can intentionally choose to steer it to this gravel road. And then as you keep doing this, then you're going to put the pavement down, all that milling and paving and stuff. And so eventually it becomes the preferred road to go because you've been working at it. You've been choosing intentionally to use this intervention and making a new pathway. And that's the neuroplasticity. That's the changing the brain thing. So
that's so cool. It's almost like an anxiety practice.
Absolutely.
I'm anxious. I can practice my anxiety strategies. Which one am I going to pick out of my tool bag? And kind of make it fun.
Absolutely. And having a tool bag is good. Like I talk about starting with one, but eventually, have a bunch that you can pick from, because sometimes your go-to isn't working this particular day. So Carol, I like that, like having a tool bag or a basket of different things you can go to. And that will come with time as you get, as you begin to connect with one or two of them, and then you can move on and try another one. So empowering for adults, but also for kids too. And it can be a fun thing to do with them. If you want to know a little bit more about the mirror game, I'll include a link for that. There's a YouTube video that Dr. Levine talks about how to do it. So you can kind of learn the details of that, because that could be kind of fun, I think, for kids. So should we move into breath work?
Well, I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite strategy?
Actually, I like intuitive movement, just in terms of putting on music and moving however I think I need to move. So I'm thinking of a time I was anxious, and I also had a vacuuming chore on my to-do list, and it was a work from home day. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get up. I'm going to put on my Phil Collins. I'm dating myself now. I'm going to put on my Phil Collins on, my AirPods, and obviously it had to be pretty high so I could hear it. And I just started vacuuming, and I kind of just moved a little while I was vacuuming. I felt really good that I was moving. I was getting a chore done, and I was listening to somebody I really like. And I really did feel better afterwards. It's not that the problem necessarily goes away, but the energy that you're putting towards that problem is kind of put into perspective. The adrenaline's gone from it. So it's not this 3-alarm fire anymore.
Yeah.
So that would be my favorite. A lot of people just like to move their legs, especially if you work from home or you're working in the office, and let's say you're stressed about a deadline or something. It's really easy to just move your legs up and down. Can you picture that? You're sitting in your chair and you're sort of tapping your feet, and you're discharging energy there, and you can keep working, and doing that. So that's one that clients have told me that they like to do, just because it's a little bit more discreet,
Yeah.
I'm debating on whether asking this question or not, and because I think there's going to be people out there that think the same way or want to know, but so what if you like that lifestyle of cats?
You don't want to give up your love affair?
Seriously, there will be people out there that go, I don't want to give up my caffeine. I don't want to give up that glass of wine. That stuff helps me in their mind, and like a little piece of like a donut with my coffee in the morning. I don't want to give that up. That brings me joy.
Absolutely. I mean, I love my coffee. I mean, I get this. I think we all have things that comfort us. And, if you're experiencing anxiety, that comfort is important, and if it's one of those cats, I guess I would say there's 2 answers to that. Number one, you could look at when your anxiety is particularly bad. Let's say you have sort of a baseline anxiety that you're sort of used to dealing with, especially like if you have an anxiety disorder. But let's say it's particularly bad for whatever reason. Then this is a place you can go temporarily and say, okay, I really don't like how I feel. I'm sleeping less. I'm way more irritable. I can tell how I am with the kids. This is short term. I'm going to pick one of these things that I know are contributing to my anxiety, or very well maybe, and just either limit them, maybe not eliminate, but maybe I'm going to limit them just temporarily. So you can think of it as, you don't have to give it up entirely, but maybe short term until you can kind of be back in your usual maintenance phase. So that's one way. If that's not even something you want to do, I mean, just know that you are making that choice. And so one of the things that I'll talk about at the end, they're my top 5 strategies that deal with like the cortex that gets into those anxious thoughts. I can address that with one of the interventions there, because basically you're your own anxiety expert. So if you don't want to give up, what is your...
Oh,
Cheryl?
Cats.
Everything but
Cheryl,
tobacco.
cats, all of them.
CTS? No A?
Yes, CTS.
Okay. So then you can tell yourself, and I'll get into this more, remind me if I forget, but you can get into understanding your anxiety and being an expert and almost a commentator. And that's one of the strategies, is being a commentator to your anxiety. So you can say, I'm feeling anxious. I have my heart rates going here. I'm starting to get into some worry thoughts, but at least I know it's probably because I've had 3 cups of coffee and it's 11 a.m. And so then what that does is it just takes the urgency and emergency out of it. It's like, I understand why. And so there's like a little less energy devoted to what's wrong with me.
Right.
You kind of know a cause. And then you can even get into some neuroscience and be a commentator that way and say, hey, the caffeine is triggering these neurotransmitters in my brain, and it's just making me feel more anxious right now. but I'm safe, at least I understand why. And so it's like coaching yourself through it,
Okay.
So I'm not advocating that you do those things in excess, but if you do choose to keep partaking in cats, then maybe that's a strategy that you can use, either temporary limiting, whatever it is, or using that sort of strategy.
Yeah, I didn't start drinking coffee till I was 50.
Oh, wow. That's a long time to go without coffee.
Yeah, I couldn't choke it down. And suddenly, actually, I started to. And it's a whole different world. It's a comforting world. So that's why I asked. You have that when you go to bed at night, I'm looking forward to the pot of coffee brewing. And so there's people out there that are going to go, what? To give that up? But like you said, if you know where it's coming from and you don't want to give it up, then you can talk to yourself or learn to like move the legs to expend the energy. So that's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to how much do you want to suffer?
Exactly.
If you're really suffering, you're probably going to try one of these strategies. So, again, we have choices, which Carol keeps pointing to. It's like we have choices. We have some control over what we choose in terms of managing our anxiety. We're not going to eliminate it, but we can definitely do some things to manage it. So,
okay.
All right. So should we get into some breath work stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Breath work is another area of intervention that helps invite calm. It invites calm to just your whole regulatory system. It helps us reset. It definitely calms the amygdala and the vagus nerve. If you're familiar with the vagus nerve, that's one of our longest nerves that we have in one of our systems. It's like a brain to gut connection. And that's why, like with anxiety, we can have like nausea or that knot in our stomach or gastrointestinal symptoms. So the vagus nerve, if it's stimulated, it invites calm. So the breath work that I'm going to share with you helps stimulate the vagus nerve. So, and also just to keep in mind too, those neurotransmitters, when you exhale, you're producing GABA, G-A-B-A, GABA. It's a neurotransmitter in the brain that actually slows down your body's response to stress. So breath work is really good. And it's a good immediate response to stress. Movement is another one. You could do maybe breath work first and then do your movement if you're really starting to panic, let's say. This one I would do if there's not too many people around. This next one, if you have a private office, or you can close your door because it might seem weird if someone overhears you, but it really works. It's on YouTube. Dr. Peter Levine talks about this on YouTube, and I'll give you the link on the episode. But I like it. It's in part because it's called VU, VU, which are the initials for my alma mater, Villanova University. Sorry, I had to get that plug in there. You're going to say VU, and let me walk you through it. There's a brain to gut connection, and what you're doing by saying VU in this exercise is you're disrupting that connection a little bit, okay? So you're going to take an easy, full inhale, and then you're going to exhale saying the word VU. And it's going to be deep in the belly that you're saying the word. And you just repeat that until you feel a little bit more calm. So I can do it with you guys if you want. If you just want me to feel weird and watch me do it,
Yeah,
do it that way. So take a full inhale breath and then exhale. Ooh. So it's real deep. Okay. And you see what I mean? You really don't want people hearing you do this, but it will disrupt that connection and help you feel a little bit calmer. So again, easy, full inhale breath, and then exhale. Ooh. Okay. If you're doing this with your kid, you can add a growl to it and make it kind of fun. And little kids like to do this. And I can see this being something more that a parent might do, with their children. You can even ask them what animal they want to be. So you can say, voo, rawr, like that. And then, take turns. Oh, what animal was that? And just go back and forth, your little person. This next one I think is a little more cool because the Navy SEALs use it. And also paramedics, EMTs use this as well. Because think about it, they're in situations where their amygdala and their cortex are going, right? Their thoughts are going, Their amygdala is scanning. Navy SEALs are really good at scanning. They're trained to do that. And so box breathing is something that can really calm the system down, calm the amygdala down, and get you being able to focus on whatever you need to do. So if you can think of it in counts of 4, and as you're doing this, picture a box or a cube, okay, in your head. And so I'll walk you through it really quick and then we can do it. You're going to inhale a slow count of 4. Then you're going to hold it for a count of 4. Then you're going to exhale for a count of 4. And then you're going to hold it for a count of 4. So inhale 4, hold, exhale, count of 4, hold. Everything's a 4. Do it as you feel comfortable. If counting to 4 a little more quickly than someone else is better for you, you don't want to get yourself upset over not being able to breathe. It's just a comfortable count of 4 for you. So if you guys want to try it with me, we can. Okay. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And you're just going to repeat that. And in your mind, visualize the cube. Each count of 4 is a side of the cube. And that basically just sort of resets your symptoms when you're feeling sort of panicky or overly anxious. So that's called box breathing. Any questions about that? You guys feel like that's a doable one?
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like a Navy SEAL.
You're ready to go out on your covert mission.
Yes.
So here's one that I think adults can do, but this is, again, kid-friendly. And this is just tracing your fingers with an open hand. So you're going to put your hand in front of your face and open your fingers. And you're going to trace your fingers slowly. When you go up, you're breathing in. When you go down, you're breathing out. When you go up, you're breathing in. And when you go down, you're breathing out. You're going slow and intentionally noticing the texture of your fingers and all that. So you're distracting your cortex, with texture and the pattern. And then you're also calming your amygdala down with the breathing. So that anybody can use, but it's also kid friendly. The box breathing might be a little hard for them to figure that out. So again, you're empowering your family members if you can share any of these things. And breath work is a great thing to do initially, and then movement, some kind of movement is good, after that. But you don't have to do them in that order. You just really need to figure out what works for you. Some people just want to go and move. So how does that sound, guys?
Sounds great. Very helpful.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. All right. So lastly, these are just a few of my strategies that I like, that my clients have said they like. They're just some of the ones that have emerged as being favorites. They're mindfully based strategies. This is not breathwork anymore. This is like a new area now. These are going to be more cortex targeted strategies that are mindful. So they're going to work on the cortex, they're going to work on the amygdala, and hopefully help you manage your anxiety. These strategies are geared towards thinking, the cortex, but they also help calm the amygdala down. They're mindfully based, and you can use them at the end of doing breath work and movement. In that sequence, you can go right to them if you feel reset enough to engage in one of these next strategies. So really, it's going to be very unique, whatever strategy of intervention you use.
These are based on feedback favorites, correct?
Yeah, these are feedback favorites for sure. Absolutely. So the first one I talked a little bit about in the beginning with you, Cheryl, being a commentator. So if you can be an observer of your symptoms and comment on what you're observing, so it takes some self-awareness, right, to understand what's going on, then what you're doing is you're creating space between you and the anxiety symptoms. And when you do that, that feels lighter. There's less worry and energy going to the symptoms. So just kind of put on the mindset that you're, if you want to be like a news commentator, something like that, and you're going to say, here's an example, you can say, oh, I'm noticing my heart is beating fast right now. That must be my amygdala has been scanning, and it's just doing its job, but I'm looking around. There's really nothing here. It's just trying to keep me safe and kind of working overtime. But, everything's okay. So what I've done there is I've made those symptoms separate from me. I'm kind of watching them and I'm explaining them to myself. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just basically want to be an observer. I'm feeling anxious. What's going on here? My stomach and then just kind of scan. No, my stomach feels a little wheezy. Yeah, I know I just got that call from work or that call from a family member. So that got my cortex going, thinking about things. My amygdala is worried. And so again, see what I'm doing is I'm distancing myself from the symptoms. So people seem to like that. They say that kind of resets them a little bit and takes a little bit of the energy out of their symptoms. So just be a commentator. Another good favorite is going global. If you are worried about something, what I would say is to go global and invite your cortex to extend your worry to a greater group outside of itself. Share your worry. You are not the only one in the world that is ever worried about something like this. You can say general statements like, these are challenging times for a lot of us right now. Or working parents really have a lot of challenges like this. And just generalize. It's not about it's about putting yourself in a bigger group and saying, yeah, this is hard. And then you're not alone and you've kind of removed the intensity of this worry. That's a favorite for a lot of people I've worked with over the years. Did you guys have any questions about that? Either one, commentator or going global?
No, I like the distancing yourself from the symptom.
Yeah, me too.
It puts it in perspective.
And that's where like having a little of that neuroscience to understand it is good. And it can be very simple. Good. Okay. Well, I'm glad that seems like that could be a helpful thing. This next thing is called being curious. And if you think about it, anxiety is very rigid, right? Anxiety loops are very rigid. We go back to them. We do the same thing over and over again. We catastrophize. We think we're okay. And then we go back again. And it just goes on and on and on. Being curious is doing the opposite of being rigid. It's being open. If you start to worry about something, be curious, stay open and say, here, I wonder, how is this anxiety loop playing out in my body here? What's going on? What is my anxiety doing here? And just sort of, again, observe, be curious. I wonder what started all this. Just see what comes up for you. What can I learn here about my anxiety? I wonder what other perspectives are out there about this. This is what I'm thinking, but, I wonder what else is out there. And really, when you start thinking about it, there's limitless other possibilities or explanations. Like if you're worried about something, maybe what somebody's thinking or how you impacted somebody, there's multiple explanations for what you're worried about, not just what you've decided the story is. If you can just stay open and be curious, be like a detective and not fall into the rigidity of anxiety. And that kind of leads me to the next one. That was kind of like an intro to don't decide now. Okay. And that's a favorite also. There is such an urgency to anxiety, right? It wants us to act immediately. It wants us to figure this out now. And that's all the adrenaline and stuff tied into that. So what you can do is tell yourself, it's okay. I don't have to figure this out right now. My anxiety wants me to figure it out right now, but there are no rules about this. Myself, what should or I must am I saying here? Because really, I'm making up my rules here and I don't have to decide this. And that's quite a relief for people because we forget that we really don't have to figure it out in that moment in time. We don't have to get stuck there. So it just, again, feels lighter. Stay open, be curious, and you don't have to figure it all out. Does that resonate with any of you guys?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this has been great advice.
Good, good. I like that one myself, personally. I'm a planner. I'm a J, on the Myers-Briggs. I got to have a closure. I got to have things finished, decided. Life isn't that way. So I want to know how something's going to end. I want to have a plan right away. And I've really learned by not deciding that sometimes things, like when I give it a little time and step back, not only am I thinking more clearly, not only is the emotion taken out of it a little bit more, but things kind of come together better. It's really important to understand that. The amygdala wants you to do the fight, flight, freeze, right? But It's not necessary. Yeah. And then the last one is kind of cute. There's two individuals, Brewer and Abblett, that have their own version of it. Their version is called Sergeant Mind. I use Admiral Anxious. I think I'm a Navy brat, so I just like the Admiral. So the trick here, and this is something adults use, and this is a favorite, believe it or not, even though we're personifying anxiety a little bit, it is a favorite. I work with adults. And basically what you want to do is come up with a name for your anxiety. Okay. This, again, puts distance between you and the anxiety, and it's being a little fun and playful about it. Okay. So Admiral Anxious is one that people use. What you want to think about is that Admiral Anxious, or whoever your person is, Admiral Anxious, he's in the military, he's in the Navy. He is doing his best to keep you safe. That's what he's trained to do. He's trained to protect you. He's trained to keep you from harm. But he has a very narrow focus, right? He has his job to do in the military, and that's his thing. But he doesn't always see the big picture. And so any name you come up with, Anxious Annie, whatever you want to do, this person means well. They're trying to take care of you. They're just overdoing it, overprotecting you, and not seeing the whole picture. So when you feel anxious, you can basically say to yourself, there's Admiral Anxious again, barking these orders at me, wanting me to figure this out, wanting me to worry about this and that. But quite honestly, he means well. He's trying to help me out, but he is not seeing the whole picture. And I don't have to figure this out right now. And you just have to kind of figure out as you're talking to yourself about this, do you want to follow his orders? Does that make sense? Or does it feel better just to sort of say, I hear you, but I'm just going to let this sit for a little bit. Thank you. And I think that, again, is sort of like putting the distance there with your symptoms, but it's more fun. And it really does work. I've gotten a lot of good feedback on this. People have to come up with their own names for them. I see your brains working. Are you thinking of names right now?
Yeah. Ones I can't repeat.
And that's perfectly acceptable. So that's probably one of my favorites of all the ones we've done, just because it's gotten so much good feedback. And there's actually a card deck that these two individuals that do their Sergeant Mind, it's called the Unwinding Anxiety Card Deck. And it's a big, 60 card deck of different strategies and stuff like that that you can use. This is just one version of one of the ones they have in there, that it's one of their favorites as well. So I think the big thing from today is to figure out if one of these kind of pinged you. Did one seem like, oh, I'm going to start there. Set your intentions, keep it small. Maybe there's one or two things. Test them out. Talk to your doctor if you need to. Talk to your therapist if you're, seeing a therapist, or consider seeing one if you aren't. And just know that practicing them, repetition, is important, so that what you're doing is you're introducing a new response to your brain and your body in terms of anxiety. And with time, you're changing your brain. You're giving it a new direction, a new response, a new choice to take over time. And it will be strengthened over time. And do not judge yourself. If it doesn't work out, okay. It's not going to work out every time, but it will get better over time. Or maybe it's time to look at a different strategy. But just try to show yourself some self-compassion and be kind to yourself as you're in this journey, definitely keep in mind that you are not alone. There are people you would not even believe that are anxious, that suffer from anxiety, and you would not guess it. And I think people can feel very alone when they are struggling with anxiety, because it can just take you away to another place. And it's just really important to know there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with this, unfortunately, but there's a lot you can do, to manage it.
Wow, that's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Diane. This has been amazing.
Well, Thank you so much for giving me another place to share some of the stuff that I've just discovered works well for people. And it's nice to be able to share it on a bigger platform, than the one-on-one with clients. And always fun to work with you ladies too. I can't wait to hear, I can't wait to hear off air what your names are.
Thank you for coming on the show, Diane. This has been great. I hope you'll come back again. I know I've learned a lot about myself and about anxiety, and I'm looking forward to putting some of these tips into practice. What about you, Cheryl?
Oh, yeah. This has been just such great information, such useful information. I'm excited to share it and use it.
So glad to hear that. I said I always love coming on the show with you ladies. You're fun to work with, and it's great to have a place to share all this. And, if your listeners have a particular mental health topic would like to hear more from, it would be great to know. And I can come back and address some of those questions maybe you have from the show, or just places from the show you want to go a little bit deeper.
It's funny. I really appreciate you doing this, because I always say a little information goes a long way. Like, I had a medical thing, nothing serious, but it took me a while to find out. So I mention it to people in conversations, because it took me so long to find out what it was. And it's just, why don't people, just share a little bit, And for you to come on and share this, just so that you can get the word out to more people, like you said, instead of one-on-one, is just so nice.
Really, there's a lot of voices out there saying these things. And I'm just one more voice, hoping to reach some of your listeners, and would love to come back and we can look at some other topics that you think would be helpful to your listeners. So
I'd love to.
Thank you. And so great to work with you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind our listeners to check out our Facebook page, and I will put resources from this episode in our episode description. So thanks again, Diane. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, ladies.
Carolyn, Cheryl, thank you. Carolyn, Cheryl, thank you.